The question of reparations for the descendants of slaves is a polarizing policy issue, though it has been working its way front and center into the 2020 race. Julian Castro, who served as HUD Secretary under President Obama, now the latest candidate to address that topic.
I've long believed that this country should address slavery, the original sin of slavery, including by looking at reparations. And if I'm president, then I'm going to appoint a commissioner task force to determine the best way to do that. If under the Constitution we compensate people because we take their property, why wouldn't you compensate people who actually were property?
Here now, Deneen Borelli and Jessica Tarla, both are Fox News contributors. Jessica, to you first, as far as your party is concerned and the discussion that is being had there, this is certainly emerging as a major issue on the left.
It's definitely coming up more than it ever has before. Historically, President Obama hasn't supported reparations. Hillary Clinton didn't, as well as the Democratic nominee in 2016. But you are seeing a more lively discussion around the issue, which I think is an important, thoughtful conversation to have. Julian Castro made a great point that we do compensate those who have their property taken away, and we should do something to address the systemic challenges facing people in this country who are descendants of slaves. I was reading Ta-Nehisi Coates' case for reparations, and he makes the point that according to Pew Research, white households in this country are 20% richer than black households at the same income level. And the issue there is generational wealth. There is no backup system for African-American families in this country. They don't have homes passed down. They're facing far greater challenges, and that's why this is a conversation to be had, and I think a task force is a wonderful idea. I want to play this more sound from Julian Castro, Deneen, and get your thoughts here, because he takes on Bernie Sanders, who, as we know, talks poverty, inequality, talks about institutionalized racism, and I went back and looked, and he said, quote, he doesn't exactly, what do they mean, really, is what he is questioning here, because he didn't throw his support firmly behind the idea. He said it's not clear. There's a better way to address this than just writing a check. Well, Julian Castro then hit back at Sanders for that. Listen.
When it comes to Medicare for all, health care, you know, the response there has been, we need to write a big check. That when it comes to tuition-free or debt-free college, the answer has been, we need to write a big check. And so if the issue is compensating the descendants of slaves, I don't think that the argument about writing a big check ought to be the argument that you make if you're making an argument that a big check needs to be written for a whole bunch of other stuff.
Deneen?
Sandra, the whole notion of reparations is ridiculous. This is only showing us how desperate Democrats are. We are seeing how well our economy is doing under President Trump with the rollback in taxes and cuts in regulations. It's lifting all boats. I think the Democrats are trying to separate themselves from this big field that's running in 2020, and they are pandering for black votes, which I find very demeaning.
And get your response to that, Jessica.
I don't know what to say besides the fact that African Americans typically vote for the Democratic nominee and participate in the Democratic primary. There are people who feel that it's important to be addressing this. Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Julian Castro there, Bernie Sanders. I think that Julian Castro makes a great point, though, going after Bernie Sanders for his proclivity to write checks for everything else except for things focused on racial issues, because he has struggled in the past with African-American voters. The argument that it is pandering will absolutely be made, but that doesn't mean that it's not a conversation that people in the country want to have. That said, healthcare will be #1, and if there's a litmus test, it's going to be Medicare for all, not your position on reparations.
So here's another point. So I'm 95% sub-Saharan. Does that mean I get the bulk of the pot when it comes to doling out this money? What if someone is half white? This is why this is so ridiculous. I think the progressive policies that the Democrats are pushing for are going to turn off a lot of voters. Abortion anytime, the Green New Deal. This is what they're afraid of because of the Trump economy and their extremist views that are really putting into question what voters are voting for when they vote for for Democrats.
Well, it's interesting. The way, I'm going to have to leave it there, but I was going to sum it up by Vox put out a piece basically, Jessica, and they're saying a new 2020 litmus test has arrived for Democrats running for president. Do they support reparations? Kamala Harris had put out her thoughts on the issue, says there has to be some form of reparations. Surely this is a debate that's going to continue. I thank both of you for being here tonight. We've got to leave it there.
Thanks a lot, Sandra.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Deneen. Up next, the Republican